Hello and welcome everyone. So glad to have you with us tonight. We see the numbers are rising quickly, so before we jump in too fast, I am going to let some people get logged in, get their computers set up with the audio and make sure everyone can see it. So while we're waiting, I would love to know where you are joining us from. If you could, go ahead and open up that question panel. I see Sophie is coming in from Quebec. That's awesome. Nice to have you. Adam from Texas. Excellent. And so, yeah, go ahead and just type in where you're coming from. I'm Michelle Rasmussen. I'm the EC Content Manager here at Autodesk, which means I make sure you have the learning content you need to get your job done. I have with me Jacob Small. He's the Designated Support Specialist for our Dynamo product, as well as others. And so I'd love that everyone is typing in where they're coming in from. I see John is coming in from Minnesota, and Alejandro from Maryland, Matthew from Garden Grove, California, Anastasia from Toronto, Luis from Colombia, nice to have you, John from Denver, Vitali, I think is how you say that. I apologize if I said it wrong, from Montreal, excellent, nice to have you, Jason from Mississauga, Mariana from Salem, Oregon, Ricardo from Ontario. Let's see, where did I leave off? Andy from Orange County, California. That's where my dad was born, was Orange County. It's nice to have you. Maria from Orlando, Florida. Ralph from Tampa. Suzanne from Atlanta. Oh, we have Usama from Minnesota as well. So a couple of people from Minnesota, excellent. Iman from Phoenix. Frank from North Carolina. Excellent. It's so great to have all you guys with us tonight. We will be getting started. What I'll do, I'll go ahead and start talking about some of the orders of business, so I don't take too much of Jacob's time to show you what he's here to show you, and then I'll turn it over. So just to remind you, this is a series. We are here today talking about understanding lists, collections of data in Dynamo. So Jacob's going to do a fabulous job helping us understand what those are. Next week, however, we are going to be joining live from Autodesk University. So let me just show you really quick. I'm going to jump over to our web page here. The Autodesk page, in fact, I'll go ahead and put this in the chat panel when I'm done talking about it. You can go ahead and explore all of the different classes and things. If you'd like to join us live at our meetups, we have a live meetup for the architects as well as civil engineers, BIM managers. We have a lot of them. So there's a lot of live courses and meetups and things happening. Definitely go out and get registered for that. AU is free this year, so don't miss out. Usually it's, a couple $1,000s to attend AU, and you have to fly down to Las Vegas usually. And this year it's completely virtual, so you can join right from where you are and join for free and get a wealth of knowledge as well as networking through those meetups. So really hope to have you next week at AU. And with that, I'll go ahead and move on. Just a few orders of business. I do have your lines muted for background noise. That's because we are recording the session. Everyone will be emailed a recording of this session afterwards, everyone that registered, so not just those of you that are attending, everyone who registered will receive that. However, we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions during the session, please go ahead and type them in that Q&A panel, and I will raise those questions for Jacob when he's ready for them. So make sure you have that Q&A panel all ready to go. And with that, Jacob, I'm going to turn it over to you. So let me jump in and give you, let's see, here we go. I'm going to give you rights to present, and you should be able to share your screen now.
You seeing the PowerPoint presentation now?
I am seeing that. Yep, it's perfect. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. So welcome everybody. This is Dynamo office hour session number 4. This is about lists and data structure, how to work with more than one thing at a time, because we don't want to have to hit run on a graph to do every single individual thing. We want to hit one run once and have many things alter at the same time. So as mentioned, my name is Jacob Small. I am a designated support specialist focusing on generative design and BIM, which is a really long title. It means I help some of our largest customers, our customers with EDAs, adopt Dynamo, Revit, generative design for Revit, BIM 360 design, and similar applications at a high level. To show this big wall of text during every one of these presentations. It's a lot of legal speak that can more or less be boiled down to if I make any sort of indication towards product functionalities that the team is currently working on, don't let that sway your purchasing decisions. You want to make those purchasing decisions based on the capabilities that are within the software today. So looking at what we're going to cover today, I've got more or less 15 minutes or so set aside to talk about lists and list structures and how to work with different structures of lists. Then we've got time for questions and answers, answering whatever questions you guys may have. So definitely get those typed up in the chat in advance. And then we'll go on to talking about lacing and levels after the fact. So really the biggest piece with lists is they're key to computational design. If you don't sort of leverage lists well, you're not really going to be able to run graphs effectively. You're going to have to sort of hit go for every single word or every single door or room. It would be much simpler to be able to say, do it for all the rooms at once or all the doors at once or all the words at once, right? And that's what this is all about. Conceptually, you sort of have to break things down, and the easiest way to do that is really with an analogy. So bear with me for a minute here. We can see here we've got a single color pencil. Likely it was part of a collection that was purchased at one point. May look something like this. And this is how we can sort of visualize that collection. But the reality is if you don't take a moment to organize your collection of colored pencils, it will very quickly wind up looking like something like this, right? Total chaos. Green's next to the orange and yellow's about to roll off the table. Getting the right one in a hurry definitely gets much harder, and you basically have to go hunt for the one that you're looking for and just sort of keeping with the flow of the drawing that you're working on. A better way to keep the collection organized is in a package. Maybe it looks something like this, or maybe yours is a different brand or something along those lines, but this sort of idea is really key. Taking the data and putting it in something that we can organize with, taking the data in this point being the pencils and collecting it together. Even better if it has a top to keep things from getting accidentally broken. And just like computers, our colored pencil collection, our computers in Dynamo as well need to keep things organized. This is how lists come in. So just like we're able to make better use of our pencils by sort of gathering them in a box, we can move them around as one set. We can pull out individual pieces as needed, put it back when we're done. Dynamo needs to be able to do the same thing, right? So we can imagine taking chunks of data and collecting them into a box and then referring to that box as a list. If you already know coding, you can think of this as an array in some other languages. And what's really great about lists and collections is we don't have to stop at one box, right? We can take that box and we can collect that in a box of boxes. And there's likely a box in the store that we bought the original collection of colored pencils that looks something like this, right? And the reality is, that store probably at one point had a whole bunch of those boxes sitting on a shelf, right? And even before that, back when it was at the warehouse, there was a building full of boxes storing all of those boxes of colored pencils, right? And so on and so forth. You can go all the way back out and think of the world as one giant collection of means of storing data, right? Maybe that's a little bit too far, but the idea sort of still holds true. So breaking that down a little bit simpler, we can start to sort of scale back and look at kind of our objects as either items, right? Our single pencil being an item, or a collection of items, right? So we can start to think of the pencils as a list of items. And then we can go lists of items, and all the way down to arbitrary ranks, right? As many levels deep in that collection of lists as we may desire. And we don't have to work with just pencils, right? So this is a similar example. This is looking at animals, right? So on the left, we have a single animal, then a list of animals, then a list of lists of animals, then a list of lists of lists of animals. This is an item, and then list of lists, all the way up to that arbitrary rank, however deep we have to go to work with that content that we may be dealing with. Now, Dynamo similarly is going to have that same capability, but it's not going to have sort of the cute cartoons, right? Dynamo is going to display the data in lists like this, right? And we've talked about the data preview before and shown some of this, but now we're going to get a little bit further into the weeds to talk about what this really looks like. Now, the first thing that you want to notice is our lists do not start counting at 1. Right? The first item, or the sort of number before each one of those items in that list, that is referred to as the index, right? The index of a given item always starts at 0. This is because the list, again, also known as arrays, indexes are given relative to their position in memory. That is, how far do we have to offset from the start of the data set to find the item that we're after, right? So you can imagine going all the way back out to that list of colored pencils, and the first one's the pencil all the way on the left. If we want to grab that first pencil, we would have to move 0 spaces. If we wanted to grab the second pencil, we would have to move over 1 pencil, and then move over 2 pencils to get to the third pencil, move over 3 pencils to get to the fourth, so on and so forth. That offset is sort of the key piece. It's really, really confusing at first, but after a while, it will start to become second nature to you. You'll just know I either have to add 1 or subtract 1, depending on what sort of methodology it is that I'm looking in terms of how I'm thinking this through, okay? The next thing that's really important to watch for is your list level, right? List level is basically going to tell you how deep, how nested is this collection of items. And I will slow down a bit. Sorry about that, Anastasia. Thank you for asking. So you can imagine your collection of items basically being a question of each one of these list levels, right? The box that's sort of all the way on the outside, or the box that's inside the box, or the shelf that the boxes sit on, all the way down to those individual pencils are really just a question of how nested is this list. And the way Dynamo displays this is with our list levels. List levels are pretty easy to visualize in Dynamo in terms of how it's presented. It's actually, I find it much simpler to understand than a lot of the other display mechanisms that are out there. You can almost think of this like a folder structure or folder tree in terms of thinking about it in terms of a Windows Explorer methodology. So all the way over there on the right, we have our individual points. These are our items. These are always at level 1, and those are collected in a list that's collected in a list that's collected in a list. So here we have a list containing lists, containing lists, containing points. Those points, the last item, the deepest nested portion of that set is always going to be at level 1. The list containing the items is always going to be at level 2. The list containing the list of items at level 3, and the list containing the list of items at level 4, and so on and so forth. You can see exactly what level any one of these pieces is at by simply tracing down those lines that I was previously highlighting here and going all the way down to the bottom of the preview. When you get down there, you'll see it will say at L4, at level 4, or at L3, level 3, at L2 for level 2, or at L1 for the individual items at level 1 in the list. Right? Another key feature to keep in mind here when we look at our list is the count, right? So we talked before about the indexing of the lists themselves. I'm going to go back a couple slides so we can sort of see this well. We've got the indexes that are, again, starting at 0 and then counting up, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. The total count on this section is 4. But within lists, we can also look down here in the lower right-hand corner. Anytime we have a list, it will tell me how many overall items are contained inside that list, right? So it's really easy for us to sort of quickly go forward and understand what the sort of overall scope of the content that we're working with really is. All right, so now that we understand how lists are structured, let's talk a little bit about ways to work with lists. And we're going to have some time for a demo here at the end of the session, so we will get to see a little bit of the library here as well. But these are some of the key nodes for creating and working with lists. The initial create ones are primarily going to be under the generate section of the list area of the library. The most frequently used method of creating a list is probably this guy right here, which is our list.create node. This will allow you to basically collect individual pieces. And this is one of those nodes that has a different user interface than the typical Dynamo graphs. You see, we've got this little plus icon right here and a little minus icon next to that. We can actually hit this button and it will expand out the number of inputs that are available. If we hit the minus, it will remove inputs that are available from that list. So we can quickly break it down into less indices within our list or add new indices to the list. Once those are added, we can wire content in to basically insert items at that level within the list, which is very handy. The next node that we see on here is the range node. Ranges will allow you to basically build a series of numbers, which is going to start at a given number, end at a given number, and step by a value in between. So if we start at 0 and end at 8 and step by 2, the list is going to be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. We stop. Right? Sequence is similar to the range in that it's going to build a series of numbers. It's still going to have a start value, so we'll start at 0 again in this case. Then it's going to ask for an amount. We could start at, say, amount of 3. And then it's going to ask what you want to step by. In this case, we'll say 3 again, so 0, 3, 3. We start at 0, go 3 times by amount of 3, so 0, 3, 6. That's a total of 3. We stop. Right? And that's going to be allow you to quickly build series of numbers between those two, the range and the sequence, to allow you to explore larger collections of data and generate collections of data as well, which is really handy. Some other useful nodes when working with lists, list.count will tell you how many items are in a given list. So if we think back to that preview that I showed before, where it said that, we counted up there are 5 items in each index, but the total count was 125. List.count will not give you the number 125. It will give you how many items are in that given level of the list, right? We'll talk more about list levels in a coming session, but you can imagine if we're counting from, 5 items deep, we've got 1 through 5, 5 lists of that. The result of a list count isn't going to be 25, it's going to be 5. Okay, so something to keep in mind, it's always going to count at that outer level unless you adjust the way the node is behaving. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next session. From there, we've got list.unique items. This will give us the unique items that are in a list. So you can imagine if your list is A, B, C, A, B, list unique items is going to return just A, B, C. It's going to get rid of the second A and the second B. Just give me the stuff that only shows up once, which is really handy. From there, we'll go into list first item. This is going to pull the first item out of a list. So imagine, again, we've got that list of A, B, C, right? The first item, it's just going to return the letter A, right? It's going to get rid of the B and C, just take the first item out of that list. And then list.last item is going to take the last item out of the list. So again, with that ABC list, it will return just the letter C. The next node on there is this list.drop items. This is a really useful node. It will allow you to basically remove items from the front of a list or the end of a list if we use a negative index. So if we had a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, and we said, let's remove the first one item from the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, we remove that first one. We're just going to have 2, 3, 4. If we drop -1, it's going to remove just the 4, so we're going to have just 1, 2, 3. And then list.slice is going to take a given list, ask where do you want to start slicing this list up, where do you want to end slicing this list up, and what do you want the steps to be in between. So again, you can imagine doing that 2, 4, 6, 8 sort of portion in between, only it's not going to just do the 2, 4, 6, 8. It's going to say, okay, start at index 0, end at index 8, right? Or 4, and 8, we'll say, and then step by 2. So the first list is going to be 0, 1, next list is going to be 2, 3, next list 4, 5, so on and so forth. And then the next node here, and this is a very, very, very important node. This is the list.transpose node, all right? And you can see I've got a fairly basic graph that I've put together here, which has a range that I've started at -50, ended at 50. We're gonna have 3 values in between, and I've used that to create a series of points, right? And if you look really closely at the values here on these points, you can see my X values here are all at -50, but my Y values change, right? -50, 0, 50, and then my next sublist, my X values are all at 0. My Y values -50, 0, 50. And then my next list, all my X values are the same at 50. And then the Y values again vary. by wiring that into a transpose, we're basically going to take the columns and turn them into rows, the rows and turn them into columns. You can almost think of it like taking an Excel spreadsheet and just twisting it 90 degrees and then trying to label things that way. What this means is our X values are no longer going to be consistent, right? So when we look here, we were previously all consistent at -50. Now the X values vary at -50, 0, 50, but my Y values are all consistent at 50. Right? My X values in my next list are all vary, -50, 0, 50. My Y values are all at 0. And then last but not least, -50, 0, 50 for my X values in my third sublist. My Y values, however, are all at +50. By doing this, we can use a line by best fit through points. Previously on the original list up here, highlighted in black, all of these pieces are basically just running consistently on that X-axis, right? We've just got consistent -50 value, right? Whereas our transpose list, things are going to be drawn on the opposite axis, right? Those are the highlighted in blue. Okay, this is really, really useful, specifically highlighting this because I get asked this question all the time when people are first getting started with their Dynamo sort of journey. One of the very common things that people start to go through is, hey, I want to create take data from Revit and write it out to Excel, or take data from Excel and push it back to Revit. And that sort of bi-directional method, in order to get that working correctly, you almost always have to do some list.transpose. So it's a really important thing to keep in mind. All right, and then the next piece to go over is performing functions on lists. So once we've got our list together, if we wanted to work with something that just does individual parts and pieces. So in this case, we're looking at a string.length node. And this is going to work with the basic data type of a string and tell us how many characters are in that string. The great thing with lists is it's going to do sort of all of the work around sort of writing out the for loop for us by allowing the lacing to sort of take over. And again, we'll talk more about lacing in the next section, but where each node's going to be a function, it's going to iterate over everything that's in that list when it has just a single input. So this is really, really straightforward, and allows you to, once again, instead of, you can imagine having to sort of enter in all those string nodes, right? Type up red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Time consuming there, but imagine if every time I wanted to get the length of that piece, I had to place another string.length node, right? This gets really, really complex really, really quickly. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do a live demo on this piece, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as well. So you do have questions, feel free to bring it up in there. But you guys should see my Dynamo window now, right? You can see the basic user interface. We've talked about how our library is structured, how all the content's set up. I do have a couple of add-ins added in here. I also have some various added packages that have been installed, some of them for AU sessions and things like that. But for now, we can focus in pretty much entirely on just this one portion of the library, because this is where all the nodes that we're going to try and create are. So the first thing that we need is we need to place those string nodes, right? There's a couple different ways we could get those. The first one is to click into our library, and then I'm just going to type for what it is that I'm looking for. If I type string, it's actually the first one that's listed, which is really handy. So we can click right in on here, and this will bring us a string, or place a string node onto the canvas, right? Which is really handy. Another thing that we could do while we're here is we could click on this piece where it says basic. We talked about this in the previous sessions, but by doing that, that's a hyperlink, and it's going to bring us to the section of the library where that string node is. This makes it really easy to find sort of associated nodes, right? We can place a few of those. The other thing that we can do with these nodes or the other way we can find nodes, right? So if we just happen to know that that's under input basic, we could just navigate there. But the last way we can find a node is we could right click on our workspace background and start typing. Notice I didn't right click and then click into the search menu. If at any point you click into the search menu, it's just going to wipe away all that work that you've done. So it's just right click, hands off the mouse, and then type what it is that you're looking for. And this is your quick search. There was a great new feature just released today for Dynamo Core or Sandbox for Dynamo 2.9, which is going to allow even more sort of faster right-click search for nodes where you're like, what do I want for an input? It's definitely worth checking out the Dynamo BIM blog for that sort of info. But anyway, for the version that we have in front of us, when we click on the string, it's going to go ahead and it's going to place that node. The other thing that we can do is I can very quickly just do a quick Control-C and Control-V to paste that last node on there, right? From here, it's just a matter of filling out what I want in the string, because the string node is another sort of unique node. We're going to go ahead and click in there, and then notice we get the cursor so we can quickly type what it is that we want. So I'm going to type the list of colors. So we've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. So now I've got all my different strings, and if I want to find out how long each one of those strings is, we could use a string.length. Now I'm not seeing it under this basic piece. There is an entire section in the library though for string. I don't want to generate, I don't want to create a string, right? I could inspect a string, and sure enough, under there is length. Okay. The other way we could find that is we could come up into our search, and I'm going to clear this all out, and we'll type once again string.length, and there it is. Okay. So I could copy and paste this, and you can imagine the amount of work. You know, most graphs aren't going to be just one or two nodes like I'm showing here. Most graphs are going to be a whole bunch, right? So then we could start to wire this stuff up. There's a lot of extra clicks here, right? The other way we could do this, instead of worrying about getting those pieces individually, I'm going to go back, I'm going to highlight all of these, I'm just going to hit delete, is we could use a list.create node, right? And we can search for this right up in here as well. And again, it's that first node that's listed, right? If we just type list, that is under the generate section of the list section of our library, right? Again, so under the list area, we've got the generate bookcase, we've got the inspect bookcase, match, modify, and organize bookcases. Generate is where list create is, right? From here, I'm going to zoom in a bit so we can make this a little bit bigger for everybody to see. We're going to go ahead and hit this plus button a few times. And that gives me 6 indices starting at 0, item 5 being the last one, and we can quickly start to wire these pieces in. With all of this content here, we can see I've got all those colors that are wired together now. Instead of having the individual pieces and having to place multiple string length nodes, I can wire this in once, and I get all those different values from red, 3 characters, orange 6 characters, yellow 6 characters, green 5, blue 4, and purple 6, right? Which is really handy. Good question in the chat from Bill in terms of what software experience is good before learning Dynamo. What's great about Dynamo is it doesn't matter what your level of experience or what your level of sort of expertise is. Pretty much anybody can get started. If you have some coding experience, it might be a little bit easier for you to get started. You also might find that you're frustrated because you want to just start flying right away, and Dynamo doesn't necessarily allow you to do that in all cases. So it really does vary, but you don't need any particular software. What I do recommend though is if you're trying to do something in Revit and you're not really strong with Revit, you're probably going to struggle with Dynamo more than somebody who's very skilled at Revit has an equal Dynamo skill set. The more you know your integrated application, the easier your Dynamo for that integration is going to be. And the same is true for Alias or Advanced Steel or Formit or any of the other applications that are out there. So from here, we've managed to create our list of counts of each of those pieces, and that's pretty much all we have today. We could look at doing some other stuff from here. Let's say we wanted to sort of count how many characters there were overall. We could go into our math section, and we could look under operators, and we've got all sorts of operations in there, right? We've got minus, not equal to, multiplies, so on and so forth. I'm not seeing anything good for sum, right? Maybe under functions. And this is again where knowing your library is handy, but even more importantly, it's understanding how to search in your library. So we could do a real quick sum node. And this, by just searching for that, you can see it's the second one that's listed there. That was in fact under functions. And it's a little bit lower down, all right? It makes sense that it's under the modifiers area, not under the create. And then I'm gonna wire this in, and it's gonna tell me how many characters in total were in use. We can very quickly get to where it is that we're after, which is pretty handy. All right, so that hit the half-hour mark, which is what we wanted to present for. Sorry if I went a little bit quick in the beginning. I wanted to make sure we had time to get all the way through the demo. Hopefully you can go back and catch the recording if needed. So whole bunch of links. Again, these are really, really important, and we'll get the PDF posted so you guys can refer back to these as well. But dynamobim.org is Dynamo's home on the web. It's definitely worth going to periodically. I definitely recommend checking out the blog. There's a great new piece highlighting the new benefits of Dynamo Core 2.9 that just posted today, which is really great. We've also got some information on or some ways to get different Dynamo builds installed on there. So if you did want to start playing around with Dynamo Core 2.9, you could get that from dynamobuilds.com. Go there and download the latest stable build. For basic Dynamo development, actually probably more advanced Dynamo development information, and to interact with the Dynamo development team directly, you can go to the Dynamo GitHub. Again, Dynamo being an open source application makes it very unique to the Autodesk software collection in that you guys could actually do your own pull request and submit a thing that makes Dynamo even better for the rest of the community to use. Again, that's at github.dynamo or github.com/dynamods/dynamo. To get started with learning Dynamo, I do recommend everybody go through the primer first. That should pretty much always be your first exercise, is going through the primer. Don't skip anything. All of those exercises are really, really important. You don't want to sort of miss out on any of that content. So again, start at the primer, even if it's doing something like laying solar panels out on the roof and you're like, I'm a sprinkler engineer, I don't ever have to worry about solar panels. It's not laying the solar panels out on the roof that's important. It's the methods that you had to use to lay the solar panels out on the roof that's important. From there, we've got the Dynamo forums at forum.dynamobim.com. Great resource to get all sorts of different content from the larger Dynamo community. Find out, has somebody tackled this problem before? Is there a better way to get to what it is that I'm after? Can somebody give me some help with what it is that I'm after? Again, that's forum.dynamobim.com. We've got the Dynamo dictionary, which has all sorts of great resources on how to use individual nodes. We'll skip over some of these next ones real quick, just covering design script, the textual language that runs under the hood inside Dynamo can be viewed at those different links down there, and information on Dynamo Python at those 3 links there. Shout out to the Dynamo product manager, Solar Moore, has 2 great resources on there, the last one in each one of those lists for some amazing content, both in terms of Dynamo Python and design script. And if you want to get started with generative design, you can do so. Best place to start off is always the primer at generativedesign.org to go through the generative design primer, much like the Dynamo primer. Skip nothing, go through all the exercises. They're all really, really important, even if you don't need that. All right, any questions on anything?
So if you do have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand or type the question in the Q&A panel. And Aziz, I see that you have your hand raised, so I'm going to try to unmute you. Are you able to speak with us? I hope I said your name right. I apologize if I did not. Oh, it looks like you unraised. Okay. All right. So again, if you have questions, now's the time to ask them. Ask those questions in the Q&A panel if you don't want to speak live. If you do have, the courage to speak live, we would love to have a back and forth conversation. So raise your hand in that attendee panel, and I will unmute your line. It sounds like everyone's out to dinner.
Might be.
Oh, okay, we have some raising hands now. Okay, Bill, I'm going to unmute your line. Bill Santos, are you with us? It looks like you're self-muted.
Hello?
Hi,
Hey.
we can hear you now.
How are you? So let me ask you, just from, I guess, the scripts that you've been developing and working on, what is the most useful script that you developed that I guess was the most beneficial for you? And I'm asking because I've seen a lot of Dynamo scripts, and I've seen some that have taken a long time that sometimes I wonder if it really didn't make the effort, but I've seen some good scripts. And I think that's what the biggest thing people sometimes don't know is like, how could I use Dynamo? They really don't think of how you can use that tool.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. The most useful script that I have ever written is one that would be of no use to probably 90% of everybody else. The one I use most often, and it's a tool for basically reading Revit journal files and finding where the problems are so I can go back and help people get back to work. And a lot of my colleagues have made use of this. And for most people, that's not quite as useful because you're not doing that kind of work. Back when I was practicing, probably my biggest time saver script was a graph that I wrote that confirmed and made sure I had proper headroom clearance in all the stairs in 3 22-story towers where the floor-to-floor heights were all over the place. It was a switchback stair that was doing like 3 switches at some points, and all that like worst possible way to quickly build up a stair. Yeah, we were doing that like crazy, but wrote a single graph to sort of confirm that as the light fixtures were being put in the stair, as the steel was moving through the stair, and all those other pieces, we made sure we had at least 7 feet clear all the way up the stair. So I didn't have to cut. I think we worked it out. It was going to be 75 different sections that we were going to have to cut, and all the dimensions that would have to be drawn and detail lines and everything else. Managed to get that all done in about 5 minutes worth of hit run, go get a cup of coffee, came back and, oh, look at that. Here are the 15 things that are inside my stair clearances. And yeah, it took a lot of time to write, but that's one of those ones that you can reuse on that next project the next time you have a stair to deal with, or multiple stairs, right? So it may not seem like there's a lot the first time out. And what's really useful to me may not be useful to you, Bill, may not be useful to Michelle, but you can leverage Dynamo to do just about anything because it's just giving you the capability to run computation. Working with another customer earlier this week where it was, hey, I need to sort of figure out every revision cloud in my project. What view is it in if it's on a sheet, right? Which seems like something really easy to do, but it's actually really time consuming because there's no easy way to schedule that natively, and having to go through and click on each one of those and find that information and pull out what it is that you're after and then write it down. Really, really time consuming. It's the sort of thing that's going to save them a lot of time now that they've got that content built up. So, but to me personally, I wouldn't run that graph now that it's been written probably for several years, but other people will use it more often. So it's really just a question of understanding what you spend the most time on and how much of that sort of fruit is currently within reach, right? Grab the low-hanging stuff first and then start to really stretch to get the stuff that's further out there. And that's when you'll start to see bigger return on your Dynamo investments. Awesome question, by the way.
I forgot that I muted myself. Sorry about that. Let's go to Nathan Baker, who has his hand raised. So Nathan, are you able to unmute yourself? Let me try that again. Nathan, can you unmute yourself? Nathan Baker. No? Okay. All right, let's go to the question in the Q&A panel then.
Can you hear me now?
Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Could you go over list mapping? I've never fully understood that node.
Yeah, that's a good one. So list mapping, an example off the cuff. So I've got a list here, right? And what you see I did here was I used a string.length and then a math.sum node, right? List mapping, instead of working with Dynamo's built-in lacing capability, is going to say, I want to manually prescribe to Dynamo how to use all this content. It is not really a necessity for 99.9% of Dynamo use since Dynamo 1.2. At that point, we got list at level, and we'll talk more about that in the next session, but we can now say to any individual node to work with content at a given level, right? We could say level 1, level 2, whatever level of the list we want to work with. Previously, that wasn't an option. So list.map is going to take a given list as a first input and then a function as the second input. And there's a few different ways to build functions. The easiest way to do that is with a function.compose node. So we're going to build up a function from one node here. Notice this is a node that's in a function state. We can tell that because it's the lighter gray, right? Dark text instead of white text, lighter gray name bar instead of darker gray name bar. So we've got two functions. I'm going to wire them into the function compose, and the result of that is a function. Now this is a function that's in the dark gray because it's actually executed to perform that, generate that function. But this can now be wired in to that function piece, and we can take that same list and wire it in here. And the results of this are, well, the same 1 through 6 here, right? We're not truly summing that content up quite yet, but really the intent of this is, and it's all happening because I'm working with a one-dimensional list, but the intent of this is to be able to sort of work with content at a little bit bigger scale. So let me see if I can do some quick changes here to make this work at a slightly larger scale. So we can see the content here and wire that through. I get 230s. Now with a list.map, I get once again those 230s, right? So it's the same idea of processing nested sets of data sort of very quickly as opposed to kind of individually. And one other thing I could do to get to just the original 30 is this, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind, currently the way Dynamo is written sort of under the hood, the effort to pass along functions is a little bit slower than it may be optimal versus actually calculating out the results with some exceptions, right? We're not going to see too much of a difference here, but if it was a little bit more of a complex function, we'd start to see this stuff is going to perform a little bit slower than that stuff. And we might even see like millisecond differences right now if I was to check it in Tuna. But hopefully that made some sense. I'll be able to give a slightly better example of that in the next session. So if you come to the next one and then just pop in the Q&A, hey, can you show the list map thing on this larger, more complex data set? I'll throw that in there for you, all right?
Okay, thank you. And second question, nothing to do with Dynamo, really. What do the Hogwarts packages that you have in there do?
So this is shameless self-promotion. This is for my AU session that's coming up. You can download the session starting next week. And then I've got generative design at Hogwarts using tech instead of magic, which I'll be presenting with Alexandra Nelson from Perkins Eastman. We've got a Q&A scheduled on that as well. So a whole series of nodes was produced for this so that you could get into a little bit more depth on generative design. I talk about creation of those nodes and the logic under the hood so you can work with that too. So all sorts of good content there, but I don't want to give any spoilers, so I'm not going to expose any of that today. So check out the AU session, and if you do have questions in the follow-up, feel free to catch me in the Q&A.
And you can always catch him here next month too.
Also true, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathan, for your great question. All right, let's go to Valerio. Valerio asked in the Q&A panel, can you please show how to link lists from Revit to Excel and vice versa, like a door schedule, for instance?
Sure. I don't have Revit open, so give me a minute. I'll have to pause the screen share to set that up. Actually, I think I can launch 2021 without too many issues, so let that open in the background there. But basically, you're going to want to sort of look at how to gather the data from the elements. Once you've got the data sort of out, you're going to be able to very quickly under import export. There's this data piece and there's export to Excel. So it takes a file path. Whoop. Right, and then we set that to a given location. I've got too many windows open, so I can't see anything on my other side. I'm just going to make a quick temp folder. And I'm going to put a new, so we're going to make a new Excel document in there. I'm going to call that test, and we'll refer to this in the other piece as well. All right, so this takes a file path, a sheet name. I'm going to use a string node for that. I'm going to call this sheet 1, a start row. We're going to use a number for that. Start column, we'll use the same number. I'm reusing the output from that node so that I don't have to place more nodes on canvas. And then instead of doing the Revit data for now, I'm just going to write, we're going to do this. 2 lists like that and a list like this. And I'm going to join this list to this list. So you can see I now have a list of colors and a list of colors, a list of links, a list of links. We're going to use a list.transpose node. And remember I mentioned earlier, this list transpose node is really important in terms of bouncing content back and forth from Revit to Excel, or Dynamo to Excel. And now you can see it's taken that first item from each list, 3, 3, red, red is the first list. The second item from each list, orange, orange, 6, 6, orange, orange, 6, 6, yellow, yellow, 6, 6, so on and so forth. This is going to be my data. So when I wire this in, watch Excel down here in my taskbar. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's a little tiny, but it just opened up. So you can imagine gathering all that data from your Revit content instead. With 15 minutes to spare, I'm not going to be able to start that, but it's basically element, get parameter value by name, and wire in the list of names that you want to work with, get your data in the right structure, and then you can just write it out to Excel. And then if you really wanted to round trip it, make sure you include your element ID, or even better yet, the unique ID, because that's more static.
Great. And Anastasia is asking the question, how do you work in Dynamo without your Revit open?
So Dynamo has many, many different flavors. I'm going to go ahead and go to dynamo.org. So this is Dynamo's home on the web, right? And I mentioned this before. If we go to the blog, Aaron Tang just posted this amazing link for Dynamo Core 2.9. So right here, he understands this very well. What is Dynamo Core? Dynamo Core is a collection of bundled components that consist of the graphical interface, the compute engine, and the scripting language design script, and the out-of-the-box nodes that are not specific to another program like Revit or Civil 3D. What is Dynamo for? Insert host here. So Dynamo for Revit, or Dynamo for Civil 3D, or Alias, or Advanced Steel, or Format, or whatever, is a collection of host-specific nodes that are integrated into Dynamo Core. Basically, that integration consumes Dynamo, adds some additional content on top of it, and exposes both to it. I, without using Revit, have been making use of Dynamo Sandbox, which is for package developers and other folks working with Dynamo code who want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest stuff coming out, but don't need integration to those other applications. Everything I'm showing you guys today, it's platform agnostic. Everything I've done to this point, it wouldn't matter if we're in Revit, Civil 3D, Alias, Advanced Steel, Format, you can take advantage of it. And much of the content that I do is actually platform agnostic, even today. So you can definitely get more about that. And there is the link to more about, new way to get Dynamo Sandbox and all that other stuff. To actually get it, you're going to go to dynamobuilds.org. Or sorry, dynamobuilds.com. And then Dynamo 2.9, the latest released, is right there. Follow the instructions on the this link right here in terms of how to get to that content. New way to get Dynamo Sandbox.
Excellent. And I apologize if I say this name wrong. Today is asking, will the slide deck be posted?
Sure. I can get a PDF of that as well as the PDF of the links posted out to you guys.
Okay. If you do have questions, definitely feel free to ask those in the Q&A panel or raise your hand in the attendee panel and I can open up your line. I see that Adam is asking the question, can the Core 2.9 be used with the Dynamo for host or only sandbox?
Yes, but Dynamo Core 2.9 and any other version of Dynamo is not usable in a supported way unless it's given to you from Autodesk. So if you're looking to use Dynamo for Revit and you want to use a newer version of Dynamo for Revit, you're going to have to update your Revit version. There is no supported way to consume a newer version of Core. And basically what you're looking at in terms of the time difference between when the Dynamo team releases Core and when the integrator consumes that is the amount of time it takes to test and make all the many little changes to one application or the other that have to happen in order to make those two pieces sort of work consistently. So you can find some instructions on how to do that if you really dig online. I would not do it myself, and I work at Autodesk. You're welcome to try. I would encourage it. The more you experiment, the more you're going to learn. So definitely, do that sort of stuff, but just know your stuff is going to break. It's not that you're probably going to break it. Stuff will break, and you may have to put it all back together on your own.
Okay, great. Luisa's saying, is it possible to change the element ID of a Revit element for a numbering that contains category information?
So you want to renumber your element ID. So for those who aren't aware, Revit information, every time you make an object in Revit, it gets a new element ID. At the same time, it gets a new globally unique ID, or GUID. These two identifiers are written at the time of creation. They are read-only parameter values that cannot be modified. So if you wanted to get new element IDs, you can't. The only thing you can do is generate new elements. So if you really had a specific reason to do that, what you'd have to do is take the existing piece, copy, paste in place, delete the previously existing one, the old one, and let the new one live on. I do not recommend this because it's going to break all sorts of other associated content. Dimensions to the old piece may be lost, tags to the old piece may be lost. It's likely that you're going to forget to move one parameter value over another. So while it's doable, not really recommended. And you're also going to spend a lot of time chasing something when we've got perfectly good marks and tag values that you can use to coordinate that stuff as well.
Great. Right, and Juan asked the question, can I use Dynamo to develop a column schedule in Revit that is organized by column marked instead of grid location?
I'm not sure if you're looking for the graphical column schedule that sort of shows the height along those grids. If so, I do not believe so. That's one of those things I haven't had a need to do before. I haven't tried that before. But if you're looking to organize in a different way, in a sort of standard textural schedule, absolutely. You just need to change your sort value. So if you want to clarify whether you meant the graphical column schedule or the standard schedule in the question, feel free. Juan.
And I've actually just unmuted Juan to see if he can speak to us. Looks like you're self-muted, Juan. Nope, might not have a line connected. Okay. All right, that is all the questions that I see. Oh, actually, I see someone is raising their hand. Usama, I'm going to unmute your line. You are now unmuted from my end. Can you speak with us?
Yeah. I was just trying to sign up for your Autodesk University class. What was the name of it again?
Generative Design at Hogwarts. If you go into the AU and search for Hogwarts, I'm pretty sure it'll be the only one that pops up. If not, hey, it's an extra magical AU this year.
Excellent. All right, and
thanks.
Yeah,
no
you bet. All right, I see Aaron. Your line is now unmuted. You have a question?
Yes, I do. So, out of curiosity, is there a node to be able to bring tags and text to the front of a drawing. There's many times that I can throw a drawing together and I'll have, say for example, a couple of beams, I'll have them tagged, and then something else, a change in the project comes into play and I have to throw a dimension line in, and the dimension will go over the top of the tag or the text, and then I have to copy it in order to bring it back to the front in front of the dimension line. So is there a node that I can simply run to bring all of my tag and my text to the front?
I don't know. I'm gonna check right now. Bring to front method. So I don't know of one offhand, but there is a method under the detail element order utilities class for bring to front, which takes a document, a view, and an element ID or a collection of element IDs and brings those elements to the front. So it's certainly possible, but I don't know of one offhand. And I'm gonna pop open a new Revit document in 2021 to check if it's in the newer. It may or may not be in the older, but this would tell you if there's ever any hope. If not, you could always pull the content here from the Revit API docs. I just went in and I searched bring to front, and that gave me kind of the methodology, and that's all under the, which namespace are you in? Revit DB namespace. So it's your core database namespace. So I shouldn't have too many issues within Dynamo. I'll check to see while that boots up. We've got a couple minutes left here. Hopefully I'll get Dynamo booted up in less time than that, but I have quite a few packages. Actually, not too bad in there. So bring to front. Yeah, I do not see anything in there now. I don't have too many packages in here. I've actually cleaned out all my packages specifically for my AU recording. So only sort of the bare minimum and the few I've had to re-add in there are there. So it may be that it's there. It may be that you'd have to write some custom node inside Dynamo to push that forward, but it's definitely something that's doable. Great question for the Dynamo forum, though.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions, so if you do have one, put it in the Q&A panel or raise your hand in the attendee panel. We're happy to spend the next 2 minutes answering that. And if we don't have any questions, then you can have a couple minutes back to your night or day or whatever time you are in. Okay.
The good news for Aaron is I just found, it looks like somebody had already started discussing this, and there is a solution here for bring to front. So definitely check out the Dynamo BIM forum because the code that you need is already there. So yay.
Yay. We love those answers, don't we? We don't have to recreate the wheel.
Correct.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right, well, I do not see any more questions. Usama, thank you. You have a good night as well. In fact, everyone, have a great evening, morning, or midday. It was a pleasure having you with us. Jacob, thank you so much for the amazing presentation. I hope everyone got as much out of it as I did. And we look forward to seeing you next week at Jacob's class, as well as the Autodesk University version of this architectural meetup. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye, guys.